It's 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, and you know what that means. It's Topical starts right now. A very good evening to South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Good to have you on the program. Also, our digital audience with us tonight. Good to see them, among them our guests as well, eager to get their comments in a short while. Sbu Ngalwa, heard of him? Well, you should by now. He is the former chairperson, VBS chairperson, who was sentenced to an effective 15 years in prison after he pleaded guilty to several charges that related to the collapse of the mutual bank. You also see in your picture, in your shot, his co-accused, former VBS CFO, Philip Truter, who was sentenced a few years ago. Matodzi's plea agreement affidavit, though, is causing somewhat of a stir in the public domain. A number of prominent names have been mentioned, so it's in the public interest to talk about it, right? Well, the National Prosecuting Authority doesn't seem to think so. They have condemned what they refer to as the unlawful leaking of an affidavit in the VBS case. They say it undermines the administration of justice and places several individuals, including members of the investigation and prosecution team, in danger. So it's serious. They are considering legal options in this regard. So what does that mean for the public interest argument? It's interesting, but is it in the public interest? We will explore this in greater detail, which brings us to the question of the week, and it's simple. What do you make of the leaked affidavit, VBS affidavit? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. We're going to get your thoughts in a short while. Let's walk and talk. As journalists, we are obliged, well, that's our duty, to double check everything, right? In terms of how we obtain information, well, how does that stack up in terms of a legal point of view? This man right here is going to discuss this in a short while, but you can share your thoughts with us. There's a new handle, actually. It's at SABC News_TV. That's where we are. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get straight to it. Let's get you some context. As always, attend to the magic wall. Samkela Maseko is my guest today, political reporter. Brother Maseko, let's get straight into it. Big story. Give us the background in terms of the VBS. Essentially,
VBS was a bank formed as a burial society in the Vembe district area for those particular community members to put in their deposits, the elderly community, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, and those who are the elderly, led by the then chieftaincy of the Vembe nation, led by Ramabulane, who is the uncle to Tony Ramabulane Mpepu, who was the vendor king that is currently in the courts as we speak right now. And you do know that he ended up taking over the chieftaincy. He was part of those who were in this particular grand scheme of VBS with Vele Investments, with Sbu Ngalwa and many others who were leading this particular bank. So it was a mutual bank for those particular deposits as a burial society in its inceptualization.
Right. What do we know in terms of progress in the various cases?
What we do know in the various cases is that you remember when the case broke out after that report by Advocate Terry Mutau, Philip Truter, who was the chief financial officer of this particular mutual bank, he ended up turning state witness and having a plea bargain with the National Prosecuting Authority after their arrest when they appeared at the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court alongside the likes of Denim Caesar, the former ANC provincial treasurer in Limpopo, the likes of Kabelo Matsepe, who is seen as a fixer of these particular municipalities, with Denim Caesar and many others, like also Chapiwa Madzonga as Matodzi as well, who is effectively the one who has written that affidavit that we'll speak at a later stage on. You've got others within this particular bank like Andile, who also worked as a CFO of this particular VBS bank. At this point in time, the only person who has been taken behind bars was Philip Truter until Matodzi, Tipiwa Matodzi, now came up with that particular affidavit. He has effectively been sentenced to 15 years. So at this point in time, 2 people have been sentenced, but there is movement as we speak right now.
Control, just cue up the responses from the various people that have been mentioned in this affidavit. I'll get to that in a short while. Now, this has caused obviously a stir in the public domain, but what about the political circles? What's been some of the responses?
It's been very interesting. I had spoken to the former provincial secretary of the ANC in Limpopo, Soviet Lechanyane. I covered the story when it first broke at about 2018, when those mayors of the ANC were ultimately fired, when those gogos, their deposits were taken, and they were having strongs of lines in Toyando and in areas like Makado, going to the banks, trying to withdraw their monies, and they couldn't get anything out of those particular banks. I remember a time when, after the report was released by Advocate Terry Matau in a press briefing at the Premier's office, led by the then Premier of Limpopo, Stanley Chupu Matabata, and ultimately the decision to fire those 10 mayors of Alias, Mpumelelo and various other municipalities in Limpopo, which escalated rather to other provinces such as Gauteng. You remember Boise Maneli in the Western District, he also fell on his sword for investing in that particular mutual bank. But as we speak right now, you've got the likes of Kabelo Matsepe, Denim Caesar, who are entangled in this report, in this affidavit filed by Chifiwa Matodzi, particularly on the stripping of the assets of Vele Investments, how he was told to go abroad, go to England, how his luxurious vehicles were sold, how the assets of Vele Investments were stripped, and how he got little resources out of it, and how he was literally staying in a back room in Randburg and having no assets at all anymore, and having to rely on legal aid, as per the reports by Sunday Times, by the likes of Topical I Is and Sabelo Skiti. So in essence, what we are seeing is a political fallout within the ANC itself in Limpopo. You saw the minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Nthaveni, was also a PEC member of the ANC in Limpopo, has been very vocal in saying that the deposits of the innocent elderly community in Limpopo must be brought back, and those who siphoned these particular funds must be essentially taken to jail. But legal teams are meeting. I do know that those who are so-called kingpins politically in the stripping of Vele Investments, they are speaking with their legal team and many others who are implicated by Chipiwa Matodzi and also the former Director General in Treasury, that would be Dondo Mokojane. He's come out to deny these particular allegations that he had gotten R1 million gratification.
I want to get to that. Obviously, I mean, charges needs to be preferred. Also, it needs to be tested in court, right? A whole lot of allegations. But we managed to, when the story broke out, it's been in the public domain, we did the responsible thing as to reach out to the various parties that were mentioned to give them a right of reply. This is what they had to say. Take a look.
I categorically deny I've never taken any money from anybody. I've served this country for 23 years. The last 5 years was as DG of National Treasury. My record is very clear in terms of how I ran the department and how I conducted business during my tenure as DG and during my tenure as a public servant over the last 23 years.
As an organization, we are very disappointed because throughout we are made to believe that the matter of VBS has reached finality as far as it relates to various leaders of the ANC. Of course, the ANC will digest this matter because in any event, there is nothing new from that matter. We have always known that certain leaders have been mentioned, but there has not been any work on the part of law enforcement agency in a form of charging them criminally that will warrant the ANC to act otherwise.
There is absolutely no change to our statements and positions on VBS. There are endless archives, as you know, on this matter. So if you want a response, please refer to your archives. But how about you also allocate the same energy on those actually pinned in VBS and double your energy on that Cyril Ramaphosa's illegal foreign currency that was hidden in his mattresses and sofas at his Phala Phala farm? This obsession of forcing EFF into VBS corruption is just plain down harassment now.
We need everybody mentioned to be prosecuted and to serve their time. Justice for the people, the victims of the VBS must be heard.
All right, you saw the minister in the presidency there, Zamkele. Do you think this was discussed in the cabinet, Lekota?
It may have not been discussed in greater detail. There may have been a mention of it in the president's opening in his political overview and economic outlook of the country. But what we do know is that it will extensively be deliberated upon in the ANC's National Executive Committee meeting. It has been deliberated upon in the PEC meeting of Limpopo. They won't take any action as yet. As you remember, the then PEC of Limpopo, when Denim Caesar was the provincial treasurer, Soviet Likhanyane was the provincial secretary. You had also Florence Radzelani in the mix, in the leadership of the ANC in that particular province of Limpopo. It was largely a PEC that was aligned to those who allegedly siphoned those funds of municipalities and invested into this mutual bank and stripped it off by pillaging of its assets and buying whatever they wanted to buy for themselves. So in essence, you fast forward to the PEC that is there now, led by Chupu Stanley Matabata as chair, and ultimately with Madaje, Ruben Madaje as the provincial secretary of the ANC in Limpopo. They were once all in cahoots when it comes to the factional ramifications or factional politics of the ANC. But you've got the PS now who's pulled away from this so-called VBS grouping led by the likes of Denim Caesar, Kabelo Matsepe, and also Stanley Chupu Matabata in Limpopo. So it'll be rather interesting how the ANC deals with this particular conundrum now, knowing the shift that has happened and also this particular affidavit that has come to the fore. But you can expect that Denim Caesar won't take this lying, particularly with the allegations made against him. Kabelo Matsepe will not take this lying down. In fact, I spoke to Kabelo Matsepe during the course of the day today, and he was saying that he is engaging with his particular legal team and saying that many of the points that Chipa Matodzi puts in this particular affidavit are over-exaggerated, particularly when you speak about some of the points on the economic freedom fight. It says some of the elements are true, some of them are not. You go to the points about Dondo Mokhojane. He says that Dondo Mokhojane never received a cent from this particular mutual bank of VBS. And also you've heard Dondo Mokhojane speak for himself as well. So it's going to be rather interesting what the legal steps that are going to be taken by the individuals implicated within this particular case. On the point of the 2 million rands of the ANC, at the time in my previous employment, I did speak to the then Treasurer General of the ANC. That would be Paul Mashatile, who succeeded Dr. Llewelyn Curlewis, and he had confirmed that indeed VBS had donated this 2 million rands to the African National Congress. So Dr. Llewelyn Curlewis did not pocket that money for himself, but those funds went to the ANC, and many other proceeds of this particular bank funded regional and provincial conferences of the ANC in Limpopo.
As you mentioned, lots of allegations floating around, needs to be tested in the court of law. We shall see, and we know those three are the most loaded words in politics. Samkile Museko, thank you very much indeed, sir, for your better mind on this matter. Right, let's go to a word on the street, a regular segment here, and we gather diverse opinions on the VBS case and its revelations. Here's what people had to say. Take a look.
It's good that a judgment came out and someone finally got sentenced. But it still beckons the question to say that that's an official from the bank. What is going to happen to all the politicians?
I think it's not fair because already they have money and now they're taking money. Baba ma big ballers when they get the Baba ma big spenders. Bathathe imali zabantu abazisebenzele kanzima yabo. So it's not fair.
15 years is nothing for someone's life savings, eh? I mean, they planned their whole lives, they put their blood, hard work, sweat, tears into everything, only for someone to get a slap on the wrist about it.
I thought it could be maybe from 30 years, considering the amount of money that has been taken from all these people.
The people who are implicated in these VBS scandals, all of them need to be brought to justice.
The justice system maybe is turning very slowly, and the families that are affected, I mean, they have put all their trust in these people, and for them to lose such an important investment like that, it's very shocking.
All right, we thank you very much indeed for your comments. Lots of comments, right? We're going to seek diverse perspectives with regards to this and also the legalities around it. Walk with me. I've got a number of guests with me. Let's First of all, the person that's already here is Sbu Ngalwa, Chairperson of the SA National Editors Forum. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Blaine.
Also editor-in-large of Prime Media Broadcasting. We also have Dr Llewelyn Curlewis. He is a Senior Lecturer of Procedural Law at the University of Pretoria, also a former prosecutor. And we also have Mpumelelo Zikalala, legal expert, founder and director of Zikalala Attorneys. We're going to get into discussions with them in a short while, but a quick break. Also, a digital audience here to weigh in. More next. Welcome back. Look, there's a human element to the VBS scandal. Don't forget about that. The impact of the theft and corruption of unsuspecting depositors and employees cannot be ignored to this day. This montage, I want you to have a look at it. It's by producer Maki Motlabe, and he reminds us about the victim's pain that should never, ever be forgotten.
The people who were supposed to be watching were the ones who were stealing.
VBS looting and corruption, money laundering, as well as racketeering or organized crime.
The bank was placed under curatorship between 2015 and 2018.
For one to end up in curatorship, it means that a series of missteps have happened over time.
You cannot allow a bank to trade under illegal conditions.
The Pretoria High Court ordered the final liquidation of VBS Mutual Bank.
The scandal which robbed thousands of poor pensioners and investors of their hard-earned money.
Individuals, funeral schemes, burial societies, savings clubs and stokvels.
The single mother of 5 has been suffering from depression since she lost her investment.
I'm still in pain. Even if I didn't go to work, people outside know that I'm not well. Since it was announced on radio that VBS is no more, I was at work and others could see I was emotionally disturbed. And the following day, I was so depressed I couldn't go to work.
Some have come here as early as 2 o'clock and they still haven't received their cash because they need to withdraw this cash because now this bank is under curatorship and before the 31st of August they should shut all their accounts.
It seems the now retrenched workers have started feeling the pinch.
For Mavis Nechiombo, it's not just the prospect of a jobless future that she's facing, but a chronic illness that packs a towering medical bill. Nechiombo says her heart condition requires constant medical supplies and specialist consultations, which are inadequate at public hospitals.
I felt unsettled, so I was forced to stay with my sister, where she could keep an eye on me because sometimes I collapse, and I'm scared that no one would be there to help me.
Without really let me just say enough money after working so hard, and we're actually suffering the consequences of other people's actions, which is very painful.
I was very proud of VBS Mutual Bank as a bank right here at home, and one that was supported by all our communities. We just felt at home. I wanted to help the people at home.
All right, that's the human element of the story that kind of sometimes gets missed. Let's unpack this. To help me unpack this issue in studio, we have the Senate Chairperson, Sbu Ngalwa. Also on Teams, we have the Senior Lecturer in Criminal and Procedural Law at the University of Pretoria, Dr Llewelyn Curlewis, as well as legal expert Mpumelelo Zikalala. They are also joined alongside our digital audience who'll weigh in. They'll throw in their questions. Sbu, let me start with you first with regards to the developments this week. Accountability. the former chairperson getting an effective 15 years, right? Affidavit, though, has raised some issues or some questions, exposing a few issues. But your thoughts on the developments this week in the light of justice for those people that you saw in that clip?
I think it's twofold, Blaine. The first point being that, of course, justice has been served in that Matodzi has been sentenced to an effective 15 years in jail. I know there's been a storm around the leaking of the affidavit, but I can say that the reality is that for the affidavit to leak, it must have leaked from the source, or whoever must have had the affidavit would have leaked it. But secondly, usually you have, in a case like this, you have an affidavit that leaks from the source straight to the media. But I first saw it on social media before I saw it on credible news sources. But even if it had gone straight to a media organization, I would argue that there's an overriding public interest in actually revealing the contents of the affidavit.
Right.
Because in admitting guilt, part of that affidavit would have been used in court. It may well be that the NPA perhaps feels that it was premature for some of the details to be out there, but the reality here, Blaine, is that in fact, most of those allegations, bar some names and some particular details, were already contained in the 2018 report of Advocate Mutau,
right.
That famous bank heist report.
So that's the pushback, right? The NPA says this leaks undermines the administration of justice and places several individuals, including members of the investigation and prosecution team, in danger. How do you process that? How do you weigh that up when going to publish?
Look, I think the reality is that we don't have the tools to measure the level of danger or lack thereof. But the reality is that anybody who's implicated in VBS, I'm sure would have been following this case very closely, including the plea bargains or those who are actually standing trial. Because remember that Matodzi is not the only one who was accused in this case. There are about 9 other accused that are before court. I mean, the only 2 people have been sentenced. Yes, it's him and Philip Trupta, the former CFO. And 2, if the publication of that affidavit places the investigators in danger, the reality is that at a particular point, that affidavit would have been a matter of public record. So then how then do you gauge the issue of safety? Because whatever is discussed in court, and courts are open, that would not have been, that's not a trial that's in camera. So that affidavit would become a matter of public record through the courts. So the question I would ask, if then the investigators are in danger, I'm sure they're in danger anyway because of the people implicated. And I think that the law enforcement agencies, particularly the Hawks who handle such sensitive investigations of this nature, they know what to do when they're handling such kind of investigations, because we do know that in this country, criminal elements, in fact, criminality has gotten to the point that it's commonplace for people to be killed even outside court.
Right.
So I don't believe that law enforcement would be that careless so as not to protect their investigators in this particular case. But I argue that the case of VBS, as that insert shows us, it's not about you and me, Blaine. It's about the ordinary people, ordinary pensioners, unemployed people with menial investments and savings that they put in this bank since the days of the homeland, who had believed that they would be able to recover some of that money. But also remember that yours and my money also went there through the millions that were invested, one, by the municipalities illegally against advice. But secondly, we paid twice, Blaine. Through when the Prudential Authority paid over 260 million to refund some of the investors in the bank. So public interest, it's in my interest to know what happened to that at VBS, and also to ensure that at the end of the day, justice is served.
Dr. Curlewis, let me bring you into this and the public interest argument that Sbu is putting forward. It has variety or wide context, right? And also sometimes can be seen as subjective in terms of how we portray it. The NPA is looking at various options in terms of seeing whether it is permissible for media to publish this, maybe trying to set a precedent going forward. What do you make? How does it stack up legally?
Well, thank you, Blaine. First of all, I have to align myself with the previous speaker. I totally and wholeheartedly agree with all the sentiments that he raised in his observations just now. The fact of the matter is, we do not want the administration of justice to be jeopardized or even that people's lives be put in danger. But that being said, this was always foreseeable from the outset, as correctly pointed out by the previous speaker. But not only that, we must remember that before any litigation in criminal cases takes place, there is a discovery process that takes place. So the defense and everybody out there will, in any event, the moment it becomes public documents, which in this event it already has become the moment there was a 105A plea and sentence agreement agreed to and entered into the court records, gets to know the contents of the allegations. So it's not as if we have a trial by ambush situation in court, that people all of a sudden gets this unexpected knowledge and information that is disclosed. It is out there for preparation purposes from the outset. So by merely making a comment that it will jeopardize investigation or possibly do so, or put people at risk or even undermine justice, is but too vague to do something about it. I would like to hear from the NPA exactly what they intend to do in order to put a gag order of some sort on this affidavit that already were leaked out.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, most, if not all, of the information contained in it would have been in the public interest and public scrutiny, if not already, then very soon before the trial commenced against the remainder of the co-accused in any event.
Right. Mr. Zikalala, please weigh in. Agree, disagree, because the understanding is that once a court document has been filed, then it becomes a public document and can be accessed by the public, right? But with regards to a plea affidavit, is it a timing issue?
Good evening to you. It's a timing issue, very so in this case, based on two instances. Firstly, I wonder why the NPA was in such a hurry to get into a plea and sentence agreement when there are individuals that have been implicated in the affidavit that are not behind bars, that have not been brought to the court in terms of being accused. The information which is stated there, I don't know whether they've got collaborative evidence which is going to help to prove at the end of the day. Ordinarily, you would want to wait up until the trial is ended, just so you have a hold or some hold of the individual that is making that particular affidavit and providing that evidence, so that they don't mislead you or lead you astray. Secondly, if you look at the sentence that has been issued in this case, in terms of poker, it's more or less $1 million, 10 million rands and above, and even more, and plus minus life imprisonment for a person who's been found guilty or contravention of any of the privileges that are there. Why opt for 15 years in this case, which is something that is much lesser? When you have many individuals that have suffered, when you listen to the reel that you played a few minutes ago, those are real individuals that have lost their life savings. Why are you in a hurry to try and pursue this matter in a manner like this now? Now, coming back to the issuing of the affidavit, I seem to align myself with the point of saying, I would have rather waited a bit up until you've got all the individuals that are being prosecuted to stop or prevent a situation where they can try and sum up their defenses, as they are probably doing by now because they've seen their names being implicated there, if indeed they are guilty. Or most importantly, distinguish or disseminate the money in which could have been recovered, so that at the end of the day, the victims are able to have something in their pockets to say, we may have been scammed, we may have been part of a grand scheme of things in terms of criminal activities, but at least we got something out. So it is a matter of strategy as to why now, why not wait. The type of strategy that has been utilized, it could have been a much better one. But the disclosing of information at this early stage does put at jeopardy the chances of any recovery that is about to take place, and the only thing that you can have to fall back on is jail time.
When the NPA says they look at various options in terms of seeing whether it's permissible or not to put this information out there, what sort of options, what sort of laws are they looking at?
Maybe they can try and say, according to the NPA Act, everything that has been there and that has been produced in a criminal matter is supposed to be disclosed by a person that has the official duty to do so. But in this case, a criminal matter is already sitting in court and is being adjudicated by a presiding officer. So the information which is going to appear in that particular docket sooner or later is going to become public knowledge and can be consumed by members of the public. So it is the NPA itself that should have said, this is the strategy that you are going to utilize because the sensitive information that is there, we are going to give individuals a head start in terms of them disseminating the little funds or the more funds that they might have so that we're able to recover it. Yeah. So I think from a strategy point of view, they could have done a bit better just to make sure that when they talk about real justice being served on individuals, you're able to come back and say, you were scammed with this amount of money, I was able to bring back this amount of money, and the person that has scammed you is now in jail.
Yeah. Sbu, the public interest argument is a very important one. I mean, it's even mentioned in the Bill of Rights in Section 38, whereby a person can approach the courts if it is indeed in the public interest. But talk to us from a journalistic point of view and that high bar that is set. What do you consider, what do journalists consider when dealing with leaked documents?
Now, when it comes to leaked documents, whether it's by a well-meaning whistleblower or a jilted lover or a business deal gone wrong, as journalists we know, whoever leaks information has got a motive, right? But has a crime been committed? Has wrongdoing been done? If so, and how many people and who is affected by that? You make that test, that's the public interest test, as to how many people are impacted by this particular act. Like, for instance, here we're talking about thousands of villagers and poor people of Venda and communities in these various 9 municipalities where millions were invested. So public interest, then it becomes easy to argue, to say that, yes, we understand everyone who leaks as an interest, but the overriding principle is that this is in the interest of the public. And we make a distinction, I think for shows like yours are an important one to make that distinction, that what is interesting to the public is not public interest.
Yes.
Right? In that it might be interesting to know about a particular reality show stars, right? Because it has entertainment value. But that's not the same as public interest. Correct. In arguing public interest, we are referring to whatever issue or topic or case in this particular case that impacts a number of people, their well-being and livelihoods. That's how we measure such. So in handling such information, that is always the test. A former boss of mine who used to be a SABC boss at some point, Padim Tombot, used to say, how many people will your story impact? And if you are able to argue that it will impact a large number of people, then that makes our decision-making very easy.
Dr. Curlewis, the current POPIA Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act, what does it say? When does public interest trump your right to privacy?
Yeah, but before you get to that argument of POPI, one must consider the ordinary principles of disclosure in criminal cases, because we have, in this instance, we deal with a criminal case. And the leading case law in this regard is State versus Shabalala, which is a constitutional court case where the Constitutional Court determined, in terms of the Constitution, the fairness of a criminal case, indicating that there are only a very limited number of instances where the state can deny the defense and people out there to access to a docket. In other words, to information on affidavits made by state witnesses and other people, in this instance, the affidavit that we are talking about. So one way or another, unless it falls within the very limited scope mentioned in that constitutional court case, it would have been in the public knowledge sooner or later. Also, taking in consideration that the state themselves decided to disclose the information when they entered a 105 plea and sentencing agreement in open court. They should have foreseen the possibility that questions would have been asked, that the members of the public out there will be scrutinizing the judgment, the fairness of the sentence, and the surrounding circumstances, which, by the way, always forms part of a plea and sentencing agreement.
Right.
So, all in all, I would not say that the POPI Act in this instance will find application to the extent that people might think. This is a simple case of the state, the National Prosecuting Authority, should have done more to protect their witnesses and all the information from getting out. And in terms of directives that was handed down by the previous National Director, Menzies Simelane, in the 10th of October, if I can remember correctly, 22nd October 2010, to be specific. One of the principles before you enter into a plea and sentencing agreement is to determine the number of co-accused that is involved. And that directives of the NPA themselves specifies that it should be very carefully considered before you prematurely enter into such an agreement, knowing very well that there are other accused as well, because exactly what we see now have played out. And that is one of the reasons why that directive should always be adhered to as far as possible. So there's a number of issues that takes precedent here. It's not only a one simple liner of the POPI Act or something similar. Also take into consideration the only real issue with a leak affidavit or leak information would be the question, was it unlawfully obtained? Because if it was unlawfully or illegally obtained, then in that instance, the prosecuting authority might come and argue at a later stage, the defense for the other accused, co-accused as well, that it should be inadmissible as evidence in a courtroom. But remember, that witness can still testify viva voce, in other words, orally, to basically corroborate whatever was, in any event, contained in his affidavit. So the affidavit is merely a written confirmation of what is expected to be testified by that witness, in this instance, Matotsi. Right. In other words, what I'm saying is, only when it deviates from that statement would it have become an issue, because then, strictly speaking, the state was in the position to apply to the court to declare him obviously unfavorable witness, and in which event they could have cross-examined him. That is the total scope of the matter before court.
Let's bring in our digital audience now to weigh in. Kerry, your question, comment? Let's hear from you.
Good evening, everyone. I have two things to comment on. Earlier it was mentioned by the guest speaker, the safety that investigators such as the Hawks will have when investigating this story. But there's no mention of the safety that journalists have. And an example is Paulie van Wyk, who actually wrote an expose about the VBS bank in 2018. And her expose was basically overlooked by the NPA. It indicated that the VBS was corrupt and Malemba had broken at least 4 laws. And there was a new NPA leadership at this time. Van Wyk's evidence was overlooked, and it has taken the leaking of an affidavit for justice to maybe start being served. And with that being said, Paulie van Wyk has gone through so much harassment in the last 6 years from Julius Malema and the AFF. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to say was regarding whether public interest outweighs the legalities of leaking an affidavit. I think it has, obviously, this affects so many South Africans. But even those who haven't invested in VBS, it affects all South Africans, because it indicates that the politicians who are running our country, who are part of our parliament, are corrupt. So it doesn't just affect those citizens who are part of the VBS bank, but also just everyone, every South African.
Yeah. Look, Sbu, as we keep on saying, these allegations obviously needs to be going through the right process and being tested in court. But revealing criminal activity is in the public interest. What sort of pushback do journalists often get when trying to do this?
I think Kerry actually makes a good point, and I think it actually brings us to a very important topic around safety of journalists. But before I get there, I think South Africans need to realize that they owe a great deal of debt to investigative journalists in this country. If you read the record of the Zondo Commission, in fact, if you go through public statements by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, he will tell you, in fact, he has put it on public record, that had it not been for the meticulous, painstaking, difficult work of investigative journalists, some of those allegations and some of the information that ended up making up the bulk of the Zondo report on state capture was as a result of investigative journalists. And that talks to exactly the work that Polly van Wyk did in this particular case under difficult circumstances. So I guess this in some way is vindication, but what about the personal cost, the toll that it has taken on her and other investigative journalists that are vilified, that are abused? And also you must understand that the abuse is also gendered. It is mostly targeted at female journalists. That through various bots on social media platforms, particularly on X, which is a platform that is unaccountable in terms of trying to get recourse. Right. So I think the important point here is that from our side, particularly from SANEF, that is why 2 years ago we took a decision to actually set up a committee that deals with mental health and safety of journalists, to actually work with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group to create a program that helps journalists dealing with some of these difficult situations. So it's not an easy one, but I think as journalists we do understand that it is in service of our country and in service and support of our democracy.
Let's go back to the digital audience and get Major Liborn. Let's hear from you, sir. And my understanding is that you were a victim. You lost money in this ordeal.
Good evening, Blenheim, and good evening to the viewers at home. Yes, I'm one of the victims. That was around 2007, 2008, after I've served almost 2 decades in the army. And I left the army around 2007. Then I had to get to take a voluntary package on that time. And the legal that I got from the pension, it was around 540K. And then apparently on that one, I used almost 100,000 rand and I invested almost 300,000 rand in the VBS. And later on, when all this scandal of VBS started, we only managed to withdraw 100,000 rand from Nedbank, which simply means that the whole 300,000 rand was lost up to so far. Amen.
So this is the real life scenario, right? This is what we're talking about, and this is what informs, I guess, journalists' consideration when deciding to go to print, when deciding to broadcast. It's an important point. I just want to hear from Trosia. Trosia, can you unmute, give us your question, comment?
Good evening, listeners at home and the host and the guest. Well, on my comment regarding this issue, I will start by saying that it's very important to consider the POPI Act, Section 14 of which states that everyone is practicing. And in this case, whether it's an affidavit written by former president of VBS or ID at all, it has to be important that their privacy is high. And at point what is released, evidence that is supposed to be used or help with the investigation.
Trosia, I'm just gonna pause you there because your audio, I'm told, is not that great. Let's try to redial her because I think we need her point. It's important. Mpumelelo Zikalala, let's get to you, and I just want to understand, and this public interest aspect or argument as a defense. How has the courts, South African courts in the past, interpreted public interest?
They've basically said we are going to protect the public interest as much as possible. When it comes to media freedom, I think it's entrenched in one of our provisions in the Constitution to say that there is freedom of the media. You are allowed and you are allowed to disseminate information, especially which is informative. As stated earlier by my colleagues, if it wasn't for the media, I think there are a number of things that we would know or have no knowledge of as to what exactly took place or happened in those things. But most importantly then is the part of saying, after the information has been broadcasted or given to the law enforcement agencies, how do they deal with it so that you are able to get the maximum element of justice, and that you're able to make sure that you put people in position they would have been had that particular transgression has not taken place. Now that's when a restraint, in my humblest opinion, that needs to come in terms of saying, yes, it may be that the piece that you are now handling is important, but if the releasing of that piece is going to put certain investigation positions into jeopardy and make individuals that need to be accountable non-accountable, maybe it's worth the while to wait a bit up until that information is published. I mean, you have a person who is on this call who says, I've lost 300,000 rands. Had it been that we had waited a bit, and investigating officers have done their job in terms of going to investigate, get those forfeitures issued, make sure that you've got in your collection or within your hands an amount of money that you can be able to pay the recipient at the end of the day if someone is found guilty. That would be a much better option. But I think, again, what you must do is to turn our eyes on the law enforcement agencies and say to them, why is it taking so long in order for you to investigate? What's the impediments in which you are finding? I would have hoped that the Zondo Commission would have been able to find it, but there's a different story. But coming back to this one, why are they taking so long to investigate? Why are they taking so long to prosecute? And especially in this case, why prosecute in a manner in which it has the potential of letting key individual players and beneficiaries scot-free, because they would have been able to get an upper hand, being able to prepare earlier so that when they go to court, the evidence is not enough to come back with a guilty verdict.
Dr. Curlewis, the public interest argument is said to be sometimes broad and also subjective. Are you concerned about the misuse of the legal provisions?
Well, you must always understand that there will be abuse and misuse of legal provisions and loopholes in the law as far as possible. We cannot steer away from that perspective. It's a fact of life. The law is not always just and equitable and fair towards everybody concerned in it. On paper, the law is a wonderful piece of legislation, but in theory and the way it plays out in courtrooms in practice might be very distinct and different from what we anticipate it to be and want it to be on paper. That being said, in this instance, the MPA, their major concern is the so-called injustice that might be forthcoming as a result of the leaking of this affidavit of Matodzi. The fact of the matter is, there are ways and means to obviously accommodate that perspective. The state and government has the resources available to protect those individuals that might now be confronted with the so-called dangers that they are referring to.
Right.
And once again, we have not seen or listened or heard from the NPA what exactly do they mean by this administration of justice that will be jeopardized possibly, or the dangers that they will now face. Is it any different from any other court case and trial proceedings that we see on a daily basis in this country? That's the question I ask myself. So I do think that the public interest at large here is out there, that people should know what happened here. They are eager to find out who should be accountable for what the tragedy that transpired in this VBS bank matter. If at best, the MPA must also obviously in their own midst find out who was responsible for the leak. But that is an internal process that they can then sort out themselves. And if it means that they must have disciplinary sanction against those individuals identified on some level or another, so be it. But it's got nothing to do with the majority of our nation out there and the people of the public in general.
Doctor, thank you very much indeed for your time. We've run out of time. There's so much more to discuss on this issue. But you got to go. Dr. Curlewis, Mr. Zikalala, Sbu, thank you very much indeed for coming through. I hope also a digital audience, hope we got a clearer picture in terms of what public interest has to do with the, helping people that have been victims, like Major Lyborn has said. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions tonight. All right, before we go, here's my take. There must be a sound, as Sbu said, must be a sound understanding of what is in the public interest versus what is interesting to the public. The members of the Society of Professional Journalists believes that the public enlightenment is the forerunner of justice and the foundation of democracy. And they also encourage journalists to balance the public's need for information against potential harm or discomfort. It's something that we don't take lightly. There are intense discussions when deciding whether to publish or not. For me, using my other hat as an executive producer, I would ask myself pertinent questions, regardless of threats. How will this information benefit the public at large and not just a few individuals? Also, is this information materially enough to influence your decision-making in one way or the other? The aspect of moral responsibility in the name of progress that will hopefully result in a better life for you and your family. And that's a high bar, right? A huge responsibility. Fidelity to the truth. That should be the headline. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Democracy 30 up next with Oliver Dixon. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.